We are recording. Hey, I'm Stephen Oliver. Good to be talking or seeing everybody again. I've got two very special guests, and hey, we've kind of known each other off and on for a while, but we got a chance to spend some time in Boise, Idaho, behind the scenes at ClickFunnels headquarters, helping to relaunch the magnetic marketing program there with Russell Brunson and your friend Marty Ford, and then Darcy and gang. So that was a fun trip. But guys, introduce yourself to everybody. I'll let you do that, give a little bit of background, and we can kind of go from there.
I'll let the lady go first.
There you go.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm Lenore Mizenko, and this is my husband, Scott Mizenko, and we are the Medicare Authority and the Retirement Authority. We've been working in this realm for probably about 15 years in specifically Medicare. My background is corporate. I came from corporate America. I worked for Coca-Cola, Kraft Foods. I was an HR director. I was an adjunct business professor. We had several different businesses that we had launched together. And we transitioned into Medicare, which has been amazing, just awesome. It was a natural transition. I started out in the world of benefits at the age of 22, and then I advanced in my career, but now here I am back helping people transition from their working world into retirement and Medicare. So it's something I just really, I love the space that we're in, and I love what I do every day. So, that's kind of where we are, but Scott will probably take you more into the details of how we got here.
Yeah, so it was kind of my mastermind in the beginning, and ever since I was small, most of the mentors in my life were entrepreneurs. My grandfather, who was my mentor, owned a car upholstery business. He was a tail gunner in World War II on a B-24, and
that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, and the funniest thing in the world is he actually survived all his missions, but his plane did not. There was a time when they landed in Africa, and every one of them got sick with dysentery or something. A different crew took up their plane called the Lucky Penny and got shot down. So the last mission he ever flew was on a brand new plane with no insignia, no Lucky Penny or anything on it. But my grandfather was the biggest influence in my life, because I saw the freedom he had in his life. He got up at 3:30 every day, went to his shop, and he sewed his car seats and did everything. But I noticed that every car dealership, PennDOT, which is Pennsylvania Department of Transportation in Luzerne County, all of the car sellers and stuff, like everybody dealt with my grandfather to do their car seats for the cars they were selling, whether they were used cars or classic cars. He had people that were clients that flew airplanes. He did their seats. So my grandfather had a great lifestyle, and I really admire that. Now, I know that he worked hard to get there, because I really, I wasn't in the picture till he was in his 50s, but that was my inspiration. So, travel on down the road somewhat. My grandfather joined back then it was the Army Air Corps. There was no Air Force. It became the Air Force. So, when I graduated high school, my father said to me, well, you can go to college, or you can go to get a job in the factory with me. And I said, I think I'll do something different. I'm going to go join the Navy. And I want to be a diver. I don't want to, I don't want to do that. So, one thing led to another, and I joined the Navy. Got out of the Navy, and then I spent a couple of years in college. It really wasn't my thing, but I ended up kind of gravitating back towards the underwater construction, ended up working in the Gulf of Mexico, and then finished up my career for the past 20 some years in the New York Dock Builders Union, which had a diver component of it. And it's one of the highest paid ones in the country, retirement benefits and all that stuff. But when I was about 30 years old, and I was kind of starting out in that, in that 20, when I was around 27, when I got in the union, in my 30s, I had an itch, and the itch was, like my grandfather, to be an entrepreneur, but I really didn't know where to start. So I read a book by Robert Kiyosaki. A lot of people on the call would probably know it, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that really opened up the floodgates. So I had a 2-week layoff because we got laid off in cold weather because the water would freeze over and they'd have to crack through the ice for us to dive. So the company I work for, a company called Phoenix Marine, every mid-December till January, the first week that we get laid off. So I digested every book Kiyosaki had out at that point. And a couple months later, we found a newspaper ad for a Dairy Queen franchise. And in May of, I can't remember what year it was, May of 2001 or 2002, we bought a Dairy Queen. And we had that business until 2008. But in the middle of that, I had been exposed to insurance. Lenore's resume was online for monster.com. And she decided when we opened up the Dairy Queen franchise, and part of the SBA loan was that one of the owners or the co-signers on the loan had to work in the business. So, we played along with the game, and she left her corporate position at Coca-Cola, and she was making over $100,000 at Coca-Cola in the early 2000s as an HR director for the Northeast. And I believe she was out of Carlstadt, New Jersey, dealing with the Teamsters. So that was a little bit of fun for her, dealing with those guys, because they're a pretty crazy bunch. But, along the way, we got involved in the Dairy Queen franchise. And then, like Dan Kennedy, I got involved in Amway for 8 years in the multi-level marketing. But in the middle of that, we got exposed to the insurance because her resume was called. And I ended up going to, as you know, it's called a cattle call, right? So they bring you in and they pitch you how much money you can make in insurance. And where it's all started for me, and I think 2004, was a company called Bankers Life. And, a lot of people, especially the advisors on the call, have heard of Bankers Life, and they probably don't like Bankers Life agents. And I know why. Because we had a couple different bankers agents act like they were securities licensed when they weren't, and they got in a lot of trouble giving people advice. So what I learned, one thing at Bankers, was we always started out with where we are now with the Medicare supplemental. And the Medicare supplemental was the way to get in the door. But every training we had was go after the money, go after the money. And, even to this day, I remember that was some of the best training I ever had. That was when we had the phone systems, and then you had the Phoenix phone system. You dialed in and the do not calls would be kind of X'd out. And I would call up in a little bit of a script, and it would say, we're delivering the Medicare updates. I'll be at your house Tuesday or Thursday. What day is better, morning or afternoon? And I closed a lot of appointments just because I probably talked fast and they wanted to get off the phone. And I would go out with 8 appointments in one day. Half of them would no show, and maybe 1 or 2 I could sell, because the other 2 would, you couldn't do anything with them. Right. But that's how I learned the field of insurance. And I know that a lot of people, if they make it through that, they can make it through anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything else is easy after that, because the thing about Bankers is you're a captive agent. You can only sell whatever products Bankers represents. And back then they had a final expense, an annuity. They had their own Medicare supplement. Now it's Colonial Penn. And I just got so burnt out on that model, because I ended up going from Parsippany, New Jersey, and they asked me to be a trainer in Central Valley, New Jersey, and Central Valley, New York was their office. And Parsippany is a pretty affluent area anywhere around there. But when I went up to the upstate office, it was like the client is a very poor client. And it's not the office you want to be training out of, because there's a lot of failure, because most people can't afford what you're selling. Right. So I got burnt out on that. I ended up meeting a young gentleman. His name was Mike, and he was having a ton of success at Aflac. And I really liked the idea of, I wanted to get away from that older crowd, because I was just so burnt on that, because a lot of the prospects you're in front of are very, very poor, and you're in a lot of dirty, dingy places. It's like selling final expense insurance. Right. So, door knocking, and it kind of was door knocking in a way. Right. So went to Aflac, did voluntary benefits, did that for a number of years. And I recruited there, and I brought on right now the girl that's the top Aflac representative. She's a district sales coordinator in New Jersey. I recruited her out of her dad's doctor's office. He was retiring in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Her name is Marilyn. But Aflac, of course, they changed the deal. And it used to be heavy commissions, and all the state coordinators and regional and district sales coordinators. They were all basically commission, and they made a ton of money. And then Aflac found out that, well, maybe we're paying them too much money, so we're going to put all the, the high level guys on a salary, and it's going to be performance based. So a lot of things started changing, and a lot of the accounts out there, the HR people or the small business owner were so bombarded with Aflac cold calling them every day that they needed to change their business model. So what they transitioned to was, instead of beating on the business owners and the HR people, let's talk to the guy who's a health benefits broker, and we could partner with him because he's already in the door, right, and he has the relationship. But unfortunately, what came out of that model was, if I, as an Aflac representative, had an account for one of my largest accounts was called Union Center National Bank, and it was like 18 different bank branches. Everybody had cold called there, but I walked in on a wintry Monday afternoon at 1:00, right to the HR lady, and she scheduled the appointment. She says that everybody in the brother was cold called, but nobody ever walked in and just asked for an appointment.
Yeah.
So what happened to me with that account was, the health benefits broker for that account had some other large banking customers too. So what Aflac decided to do was take commissions away from the original Aflac agent that closed it, and the health benefits broker was now getting a split on an account that I closed before he was even in the picture. So a lot of people kind of parted ways, and they left from that. What I did was I went back to the thing I knew the best. Construction diving, and I knew I could make $150,000 a year, and I decided I wanted to get away from insurance for a while. So I did that, and I went back for a number of years, and then in 2015, I believe 2015 or 16, I had a good friend reach out to me about selling final expense, and I knew what it was, but I also knew that I didn't want to be a commercial diver the rest of my life. I would go in and change in the morning. And when you're in your 20s or your 30s, you're full of piss and vinegar. It's great. But when you're 50, when I'm looking at a 50-year-old guy across from me, and now I'm 51, and he's miserable and he hates his life, and he's driving 2 hours to work each way every day, and his marriage is terrible and his kids hate him, I didn't want to be that person, because they're just not happy. And it's a really hard life. They work hard, but they party hard. And I didn't want that to be my future. So I dove back into insurance, and what pushed us to go to the Medicare was I was door knocking in a place called Washington, New Jersey, and one of our best clients, a couple named Warren and Gail, I knocked on the door, and it was to sell final expense, and I had the lead in my hand that they filled out, and he was like very rude to me and stuff. He goes, "You know what? I'm not interested in that. I have insurance." And I said, "Well, why did you send in the card?" And he looked at me all dumb-faced. He said, "Well, I sent in the card because I got this Medicare brochure from Mutual of Omaha." And all I did was what I did at Bankers. I went through the brochure with the benefits, and he decided that he walked out of his bedroom, and he had two flexible premium universal life policies with Prudential. And he threw them on the table, and he said, "Well, now that you helped me with that, maybe you can help me with this," because I added so much value just by educating him to Medicare that it popped a switch in my head that says, I don't have to knock on doors. I don't have to work final expense leads. If I just deal with people with Medicare, which is something they're confused about, they're overwhelmed with all the information. It could be a scenario where maybe I'll find another Warren and Gail that when I help them with Medicare, they'll say, "Well, can you help me with this?" And that's really where the light bulb went off. So, I did typically what every other Medicare agent does. I started purchasing leads from a company called Kramer Direct. You've probably heard of them. They've been around forever. And it was generic Medicare leads that say, I'd like the Medicare, a little sheet. It would say Medicare updates for 2015 or whatever. And what they did is they sent them a little reply in the mail with a piece of paper, just overviewing the benefits. But I would knock on the door, and I learned from a great trainer. His name was Don Runge. They called him the lead guru. And I think the gentleman passed away, but he was fantastic. he would knock on a door with a lead card and say, hey, my name is Scott with Northeast Senior Benefits. I got the card you sent in regarding the Medicare updates. What did you have in mind when you sent in the card? And literally that phrase, what did you have in mind, would start the conversation, and they let me in the door. So, we did good for many years doing that. I taught Lenore. We eventually closed down the Dairy Queen. We filed bankruptcy and eventually lost our house because we leveraged it. But in the middle of all this, Lenore began door knocking. So she went from being an HR lady to knocking on a door. And I will tell you that a girl knocking on a door does a lot better than a guy.
Yeah.
Because they like to let a nice little cute girl in and talk to them, because some people were lonely. So this is kind of how it all developed. Yeah, no.
And whether they're male or female, it's less threatening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now I've only got porched once or twice where they didn't let me in, so I don't want to let her get a big ego on it. But I understood that if I could get in front of a client and they liked me and trusted me, not only could I do the Medicare, I could do other things. And really what proved that point to me when I was using claim leads is my first annuity I ever sold was a $639,000 rollover. And the gentleman, I knocked on the door, his wife sent in a lead. Her name was Marilyn, his name was Bob. And I came in and I had the first appointment where I went through the supplemental and I closed him on the supplemental. And he'd been talking to somebody who was representing Mutual of Omaha on the phone for weeks. But I got in front of them and they liked me, and I closed them. And then his wife mentioned something. Yeah, he has to do a rollover. He's retiring. And I said, you know what we can do? When I come back to deliver your policy and I do your drug plan, we could talk about your rollover. And from right there, I did my first rollover with them, and it was off of a door knock and a Medicare lead. So I knew I had something. But what had happened a number of years ago, and I'm sure a lot of the guys and gals on the line will know this, is that they started changing the Social Security age for full retirement from I can go on Medicare at 65 and I can get my full retiree benefit on Social Security at 65. So when they changed that, my lead response per thousand went from 4% to like 0.5%. Because people were working longer to maximize their Social Security, and I understood it. And it was almost like a come to Jesus moment. And at this point, we had our house was foreclosed on, and we moved out into a small little boathouse on a lake called Lake Hopatcong in New Jersey, which is beautiful. But we downsized our life from a 4,000 square foot home to a 1,500 foot boathouse on top of like water.
Yeah.
And it was freezing cold in the winter because the floors weren't insulated, but in the summer it was gorgeous. And I sat there looking out the window because the sun would come in the window in the morning. It was beautiful overlooking the lake. And I said, there has to be a better way to do this. And I picked up a newsletter that I had subscribed to by Dan Kennedy. I just never kind of read them. What turned me on to Dan was like what I shared at the ClickFunnels was, when we were doing the network marketing, I had read a letter called the Coffee Shop Letter by a guy, Mike Dillard. And Mike Dillard came up with magnetic sponsoring. And it was that sales letter, because what I understood, because we eventually had a lot of success in multi-level marketing. We went from Amway to a company, ACN, and then we became executives at a company called Melaleuca, which was out in Idaho. And I said, so I understood how the prospect and how to close and how to do follow-ups and how to do two-steps. But I said, but if we could implement like what Mike Dillard did in the coffee house letter and send it out to Medicare clients, right? I said, it could work, but I know it needs to be like a 3-step letter campaign. So we eventually figured it out. And we got ourselves a mentor, and I've been getting his newsletter for a while. His name was Dan Gallup, who maybe some people know him, Doberman Dan.
Yeah.
And, me and Lenore hired Dan, and for about $10,000, he went, Lenore wrote the first 3 original letters, and her picture was in the left-hand corner, and all the Dan Kennedy principles we did. And even the 3rd letter, we had a little wooden nickel called Around to It that we put in it.
Yeah.
As a grabber.
Yeah.
So we went back and forth with Doberman Dan, and this was in 2008. And our system was ready to launch our 3-letter campaign. We launched our first letters in July of 2008, and we had the fulfillment done by Travis Lee at 3D Mail.
Yeah.
So, I would pay Travis, and we started just New Jersey, and I was figuring out the sales parameters and credit, and are they verified homeowners? And I looked at parameters. But what we found out is it was very scary, but we knew it would work. But the problem is, when nobody's ever done it before, you're like, oh God, if I spend all this money, 10,000 on a coach and 10,000 on letters, what if it doesn't work? And I said, well, if it doesn't work, you're going to work in construction the rest of your life, and Lenore's going to try to door knock. So it was funny that the first sale we got, and this is ironic, was from a lady who received a letter in New Jersey. And the day before, or actually the day of, a banker's agent had went there and sold her a Plan N with Colonial Penn. And she immediately canceled that, told them to cancel it. And she went with Lenore with an Aetna Plan N.
Yeah.
So once we got the first sale, I knew that it worked. So over time, we kept building and kept building. And we went from about 350 clients that I primarily acquired with the door knocking and stuff in the first 3 years, about 100 clients a year. And then we took our business from 350 in August of 2008 to, over 3,000 plus. And me and Lenore kind of debate on the number. We don't know the exact number. I say 3,500. She says 3,100, but whatever it is. But we've basically 10 times our business.
Mm-hmm.
From then. And what's really amazing is that we've had so much mail out there that there are times when Lenore will get a call from somebody and they'll be like, I wasn't ready a year ago, but I just got downsized, or I took a package, and they hold on to her letter with the wooden nickel for a year and a half, 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally amazing. So, and I'll share one more thing. And what did I really think was pretty cool was we figured out a way now. We recently launched it, partnering with Dave D and Marketing Profit Systems. We said we have all these Medicare clients, and really since the COVID, in 2002, when the COVID hit, we had been doing, like I said, door to door, and we were doing the letters. But even back then, Lenore would get somebody to call off the letter and she'd go meet with them. So what happened for us in the COVID in February of 2019, February of 2020, when it was here,
Right.
we had to, in New Jersey, you were locked down. So we went to primarily phone, and we changed our letter up and said a free phone consultation. And Lenore started doing everything phone, a couple Zooms here and there, but mostly phone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of led us to where we are now. And what's really interesting is, for a financial advisor, one thing I know is you can easily transition from educating somebody about Medicare, which is a complicating, complex thing, and move them across the spectrum because they know and like and trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you position yourself as the expert, you're just a financial advisor. And you know more than the typical financial advisor, because you can help them with their Social Security and Medicare. Because what I kind of figured out is retirement is a 3-legged stool. You have your Social Security. A big part of that is Medicare, because if you make the wrong decision with Medicare, that can really affect your finances for the rest of your life. The average couple spends $180,000 a piece in retirement for Medicare, for the premium and for the plan and for any ancillary stuff. So it's a 3-legged stool, which is Medicare, Social Security, and financial and or income planning. And if you have one of those things that's off kilter, none of it works. But what we found is the Medicare is a great way to, number one, develop a residual income, because we have a very, very strong 6-figure residual income, multiple 6-figure residual income. And you can develop your financial practice by using the systems like you do to send follow-up letters to people. And what we did is I created a transition series. Lenore introduced me into the client base, which she built, which is 3,000 clients over the original ones I did. So we transitioned in with the survey, and the survey talked about long-term care. Do you know someone that's, and it was a paper survey, like Dan Kennedy told me. I talked to him. Scott, do a paper survey and do an online survey. And what was fantastic is when we surveyed our clients about, talking about long-term care, asset-based long-term care, we got back over a 50% response from our clients. Like, I could show you, I have a stack of paper surveys this big, and I have even more online surveys that the web savvy people are. So we've closed a couple $100,000 in premium so far, just from the launch a couple weeks ago. We launched a book out with it, and now we're doing follow-up letters to move people into the to webinars talking about asset-based long-term care. And then we have another chunk of clients that we haven't mailed to, that had a couple hundred clients that have come in since August of 2022 till now. So the original batch we did with a long-term care asset-based theme to it, long-term care asset-based care to it. But the next one, we're going to talk more about an income planning and how to avoid the losses in a volatile economy and guarantee yourself a stable income stream in retirement, no matter what the market's doing.
Right.
So that's going to be our test on the next set of people. But we've been, I've been closing anywhere from, 2 to 3 to 4 annuity and or now whole life insurance accounts every month since I started doing it. So there is a lot of power in kind of going back to what you talk about as the old school, sending the letters that are personalized. And the most important part of that is the list. So, a lot of people talk about, well, really, how did you develop your list and where did you get your leads? I've been using a company called Sales Data Pro forever. And really all I do is we mail out our letters 7 months in advance of someone's 65th birthday. And in Sales Data Pro, I will go in, and my parameters are pretty simple. I use a $55,000 a year and above to the max income, a 650 credit score, verified homeowner, a verified single family residence, and that they speak English. So and I'll let Lenore take over on this part, is tell them what specifically our client base that responds to the letters are affluent business owners, self-employed people, CEOs, and high income earners. Because I would say 75% of our clients pay an IRMA, which is the income related Medicare adjustment amount. And a lot of the advisors on the line would know that. So somebody who's paying a $600 a month per person IRMA is making over $750,000 together as a couple. So we get the client, she kind of pre-identifies the best prospects based on how much they're paying for their IRMA. So it's a nice way for us to kind of gather information on people, plus generate a residual income and the upfront commissions. But it's a nice way for me that you can build your financial services practice and your income and your financial plan clients without any stress. Because I think the hardest thing for advisors is if they're not established and they don't have 50 million or 100 million assets under management, it's just making it every month to pay their bills and to spend the money on marketing and coaching and to do it. So what we've done has allowed us to fund our business with Medicare, pre-qualify the prospects, and then transition the people who are interested over into the income planning end of things.
Right. Let's unpack that a little bit, Scott, before we move on, because there was a lot built in there. And it's funny, the round to it, I came across that from Zig Ziglar in the early 80s. And I don't know how far back it goes to then. It was a closing tool. Well, I'll get it done when I get around to it. Well, here's around to it, right? But the one breakthrough you had was the foot in the door with Medicare, giving you the ability to go through all their other needs, right? And creating that opportunity. The second breakthrough is going beyond, semi-cold leads, maybe semi-warm leads, and actually showing up on their doorstep, but flipping the model and going to your own direct mail at a very targeted list, getting them to respond to that, and then closing them on the phone. And there was a lot of gaps in between there of different iterations of that. But let's talk about the letter. So if I was following specifically, 9 months before their 65th birthday, they're a homeowner, there's a certain level of income or assets that I missed that part. Homeowner speaks English, although if you had a Spanish speaker, you probably
Correct.
have.
If I would,
yeah.
I'd probably do even better. So those parameters would be 7 months before their birthday. And we've tried all kinds of numbers, but in order to justify the lead costs, I say 7 months, because if I do it 7 months before their 65th birthday, I believe it's 6 months before I can close them.
Right.
So we can actually enroll them in the plan, get the upfront commissions, and start to build the relationship. Because if they get started on their Medicare supplement, we can date it 6 months out in most cases.
Okay.
With United Healthcare, I believe it's 3. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Lenore can add to this, but what this allows us to do is, if they know they're going to retire in January, and their birthday's in February or whatever, we are also getting an idea. Well, in a couple months from now, we've already wrote your supplement. A couple of months from now, there's a couple things you're going to need to do. You're going to separate with your 401k. You're probably going to lose your group health, your group life insurance, or some other ancillary products. So we can start to pre-plan with Lenore's help. Once we make that sale, we start working with them to say, hey, when you separate from work, you're going to need to do this. We're going to need to roll over your 401k. We're going to need to do this. We're going to need to look at this. So that's kind of that little transition period. Right. But as far as income, I do have a low income threshold, which is 55,000. But see, that number is not always exact in Sales Data Pro. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that they own a home. Now, not saying that affluent people can't rent an apartment. They can in New York, of course, sure, under rent control. But I want to make sure that they're a verified homeowner and it's a single family. And the reason I do single family is because if they own the house and there's multiple apartments in it, I'll get their name on my list like 3 or 4 times. And it's not worth the headache of trying to figure that part out, right? So, and then I want, which is very important, I want their credit rating 650 or above. And you could even go higher. You could say 700 and above, whatever's your personal preference. And of course, I want them to speak English. Why do I want them to speak English? Because that's the way I communicate in English. We don't have a Spanish agent or a Polish agent or any type of other speaking ethnic group. So that allows us to kind of hone in on who we want to hone in on.
Yeah, and so strategically, you mentioned a mutual friend, Dan Kennedy. As you know, I've worked with Dan since, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. Yeah. But he talks about in magnetic marketing the 3-step letter process, right? So step 1, step 2, step 3. And then you hired a copywriter, in this case, Doberman Dan, to help with. You wrote it, but he critiqued it and helped with it. What's the headline and the conversation in the first letter? How does it read?
So when I wrote the letter with Dan, he said, what are they thinking about? So it starts up, chances are you're getting a ton of mail from every insurance company on the planet, blah, blah, blah. It's piling up like, an anthill on your counter. And people, they see my letter, it touches all the things that they're thinking. And when they call me, they already want to do business with me. It really sells them. So they're like, I got your letter and everything you said is exactly correct. I got this. I got so much stuff. I'm so confused. I'm like, okay, well, why don't we start with this? Tell me your story. And I have them go through their story. So, so what we do is we speak to them in a voice that says, all the things that they're thinking, all their frustrations, all the issues they're having, that sort of thing. So that's the letter. And I guess Scott is just.
I'm just going to bring it up so she can read it to you. But-
Yeah. Yeah.
So the letter says, chances are you're getting a ton of information about enrolling in Medicare now that you're turning 65. I'm guessing it's the annoying phone calls during dinner, mail from every insurance company on the planet, along with booklets, charts, features, and benefits. Ugh. As you know, can be completely overwhelming, not to mention that you're still maybe in denial about turning 65 and becoming eligible for Medicare. If you're like most people, you probably know you should look at some of the stuff that's been piling up on the counter, but it's just so overwhelming. Maybe you're thinking, can someone just do this for me? Or at least explain it so I understand it, right? That's exactly why we're reaching out to you. We know how confusing Medicare can be and how important it is to enroll at the right time with the right Medicare plan for you. And then I just go on to say, hi, I'm Lenore Mizenko, an independent insurance broker, and I've been helping people find the right Medicare supplement plans for close to 3 decades. That makes me sound old, doesn't it? So I want to connect to them, right?
Yeah.
And here's what makes me different in 2 important ways. We're independent brokers. We provide personalized service at no cost to you. So that's exactly correct. So when they call me, they're already pre-sold. They want to speak to me. And, you know, I'm not a natural salesperson. I came from human resources. So
Yeah.
I love
A corporate
people.
background.
Yeah. So when I talk to them, it's a conversation. And that's why I'm asking them, you know, today I spoke to a couple people that have retiree benefits through the city of New York. And I'm not really able to transition them to a Medicare plan where I get paid, but I spend an hour on the phone with them. And guess what? They may want to roll over some money. They may want to get a life insurance policy. They may refer me to somebody else. They feel like I added so much value during that consultation that they want to do business with.
They almost feel like there's an obligation or as Cialdini talks about it, reciprocity.
Right.
Like, he's done this for them. What can I do to repay you?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so brilliant about the letter is the letter enters the conversation that's already in their head.
Right.
And she developed it in such a way. Then she says who she is, her experience, and what makes her different than everybody else. And those are things that Dan always talks about.
Sure.
Get the conversation inside of their head.
Yeah.
Tell them, and I mean, we're just sharing like a fact, small bit of information. And it's enough for them to get to the biggest threshold, which is always picking up the phone and calling. And what's amazing about this is I never thought in 100 years, but you know this a lot better than I do, that somebody would read a letter and pick up the phone and literally call her,
Right.
pre-qualified and pre-sold on doing business with her.
Right.
And
Well,
it's,
and don't miss the power of they've got a stack of crap coming from, you know, from everybody else. And the stack of crap is mostly mediocre. It's not in that marketing mode of get inside. It was John E. Kennedy back in the 30s who
right.
used that term, get inside the conversation going on in their head. Dan Kennedy's version of it is, you know, what conversation are they having at the kitchen counter, you know, or at the kitchen table late at night after the kids have gone to bed or whatever, you know, the older, that's probably the grandkids, but it's getting inside that conversation. So you're competing literally with probably what, 20 or 30 other mailers, if not more. They're overwhelmed with this stuff. Yeah.
Telemarketers, everything.
And that'll be the biggest excuse. People say, well, everybody is doing this. They're all mailing for all this stuff. Why would I do it? Because, well, it's having that personal story, getting inside the conversations going on in their head, getting into the situation and providing value. Hey, and before we move on, you're in the work center there. Tell everybody what we're seeing. I'm seeing a copy machine, a commercial mail machine, a stack of outbound mail.
Yeah.
How much are you mailing now? What's your average output per month?
15 to 20,000 pieces.
Wow.
And we do that all from the comfort of our home. We have, and what you don't see is I have a little machine over here. It's called Arena Envelope Imager 1.5. And that is where I address all, with Excel sheets and connected to the computer, I address all the envelopes.
Yeah.
So, we have a whole system. We have, the Pitney Bowes machine, which is the envelope inserter that you see back there with the next to the picture, and then the professional Canon copier. And we basically got everything on a lease. The Canon copier is fantastic because when we were mailing with Travis, it was costing us almost $1.27 a piece for a regular letter, color with her picture on it, and a regular stamp. So I know stamps are now 63 cents. I think it was 55 when we first started doing it or something like that. But what has really changed is the price of postage is now very high. So if you can do anything in-house or come up with a bulk agreement with somebody to do your mail, it's fantastic. We've just basically done everything in-house because that allowed us to scale everything at our speed.
Yeah. I've been for years using an external mail house to do that stuff, but to each their own. So 15 to 20,000 pieces a month. How many responses from that will you get?
I believe Lenore will get an average. I look at her inbound calls. Her inbound calls typically are 8 to 12 a day.
8 to 12 a day.
And how many appointments do you typically run a day? Between 10 to 12?
No, I don't do that because they're an hour long. I would say I do like 8, sometimes 10. That would be a long day, but
right.
I'll do 8 a day, and I do Saturday as well. So I work Monday to Friday. And COVID really transitioned that for us because I can talk to people every hour on the hour.
Right.
So I schedule myself. So I suppose if we do 8 times 5, that's 40 plus an extra 5, about 45 a week that I speak to. And some are ready, some aren't ready, some are closes. It may be more than one appointment for clients. I never push the client into anything that they're not ready for. Some people are immediately ready. Most people want information. Then they need to do some other things like enroll in Medicare. I'll tell them how to do that. So there's a relationship that's being built over the course of our calls.
Yeah. Well, and let's not skim past this too fast. The vast majority of financial advisors are tickled to death with 4 new clients a month, right? And they're doing it all through, manual labor. Most of it is just begging their clients for referrals. Maybe, and the captive guys, that tends to be predominant, or maybe they're doing dinner meetings or something like this. But in this case, 15 or 20,000 letters go out. And of course, you scaled up to that for cash flow and to build the revenue. But then you're meeting with 45 people per week. How many? What's the closing ratio? What percentage of those?
So it's a process. I probably close 40 clients a month.
40 a month. Okay.
About 40. And they're just in the loop for when we go through it. Some people aren't ready. Some people have coverage elsewhere, but they're there, and then they remain on our list, which is one of the reasons why we look at transitioning. Okay, we have all these clients who look to us for additional information. If they're not getting it from us, who are they getting it from?
Right.
So we can give them everything they need here in one place. I worked in the world of business, even though I have a business degree, and I worked for food manufacturers. You can sell on volume or on margin.
Mm-hmm.
And the financial planning side, you don't need 40 clients a month to make your number. But
Right.
I knew that with Medicare, I was like, I want to get to 1,000 clients. I want to get to 1,000 clients. That was my initial goal. When things started to move, I said, how am I going to get to 1,000? So I set my goal. I said, it's 1,000 clients. I do a residual of about $20 a month on a client. 1,000 clients would be 20,000 a month. That's what my renewals was. Well, so now sorry about the English thing,
Yeah.
but so that's where I knew, like, the volume initially was slow, but there was so much there. And now we're taking that client and their value is way more than 20 a month because
Sure,
we have the ancillary products that we could be selling them on top of it. And
right.
it's such an easy lead and transition that everybody goes on Medicare at some point and they don't know what they're supposed to do. The government doesn't give them that information very clearly.
Yeah,
So they can speak to a real life person to get them there. And what better person to take them? Okay, you have life insurance with your employer, that's going away. Don't you think you need something else? Now, do you have enough money when you retire? Have you planned that? And you'd be surprised how many people do not have a financial planner. They don't.
sure, sure.
They don't.
Well, they don't have a financial plan.
Yeah.
More
No.
They don't.
yeah.
Right, right. Well, and Scott, you mentioned when we were in Boise at ClickFunnels headquarters that you were actively reading my new book. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. But, I have a chapter in there called Money Laying Around on the Floor that you haven't picked up. That you described that a minute ago is you had the, I think Dan Kennedy had given it to you, but to do a survey of all your new clients.
Correct.
And the survey was, what are their needs? What are their opportunities? What other services do they need? And you said before, you got back over 1,500 of those. You said 50%, either online or physically. And honestly, there you have a business that's triple, what you're currently doing, just in the opportunity that comes back from those surveys. It's just a matter of, I think you're going to have to start scaling up people to close. I'm not sure Lenore's going to be able to do 24/7 on this stuff.
No, I think, so that is always the challenge, right? So I remember, and this really all stemmed, I had kind of been poking it with a stick with MPS for a while, like actually a year, like back in when we first moved and I retired in February of 2022 from diving for good. And we moved from New Jersey and we bought a home on 7 acres of, you can see the log walls. It's an old log, it's a real log home on 7 acres in Pennsylvania, in Luzerne County, very close to where 20 minutes from where I grew up. But the thing was, I had been thinking about the MPS thing and I got exposed to Dawn and all that probably in January of 2021. But I really didn't pull the trigger until Dave D came into the equation. And I for something happened where I found his lead form or the webinar for MPS. And I saw Dawn on there again, and I saw Peggy again, but I wanted to work with Dave and I wanted to work with Dawn and Julie. So really how it kind of all panned out is Lenore had just had her hip surgery done. So we moved from Pennsylvania. And of course she hired a mover. And I said, no, we don't need a mover. I'll just do it myself in the middle of the winter. And we didn't have a driveway back then. We just had rock with ice all over it. So between that and her needing a hip surgery, she just got out of hip surgery and I had talked to Dawn and I was going to come on board. In the past, I believe in around July we talked, and we ended up. Dawn flew in, and me and Dawn and Julie Steinbacher met at her office in Williamsport, PA. And what I really liked was Don Quante saw the value, because he still, even though he retired and sold off his business, he still makes $150,000, $200,000 a year on his Medicare Advantage book of business.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't service it. Somebody else services it, but that's what his renewals are. And you think about it, that is how he built his business. Is he worked with the Medicare and transitioned, and then he got the position he has at Simplicity. But when I showed him the letters, he said, Scott, he said, this is brilliant because you have a great way to bring in the clients, and they get you get a lead and you get paid for it, and you can develop a residual income. So like Lenore said, depending on the street level commission you're at, 21%, 23%, 24%, you can, we have 3,000 or more clients, and each one is worth 20 to 30 some dollars a month, depending on the carrier. So you do the math. Over time, you can create a very significant residual income that the lifespan is usually 11 years, or you just rewrite the client if they're healthy enough and it's lifetime. But you can fund what you want to do on the financial end of things. And that's what really hit it off for me is Don said, Scott, you have all these people that it's like you need to monetize the herd, like Dan.
Oh yeah.
said.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so that conversation was reiterated when I told Darcy that she was doing a Q&A with Dan on the monthly Q&A, and I think it was back in October or September, October when I really engaged in 2022. And Dan said, Scott, you don't have a problem. He goes, you basically you have an opportunity.
Oh yeah.
He said
you have millions right in that list.
And what Don said, Scott, and even Don said this, Don Quanti said, Scott, in 1 year, you can easily add $250,000 to $500,000 onto your bottom line. And based on the numbers we've done so far, starting in December, that's easily attainable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because we're just going back to the relationships that Lenore has worked hard on developing over multiple appointments.
Yeah.
And when you developed that trust with someone and they know and they like and they trust you, by default, they want to do more business with you. And I just feel naturally that's the transition.
Yeah. Where a lot of people will probably get hung up, and God, we're going to run out of time here in a minute, but where a lot of people get hung up is they hear direct mail.
Right.
And you said a couple of things that I think is really important to pull out of there. I keep telling people the average person they're interacting with are getting 200 emails a day, and emails dying a slow and painful death. And we know it still works, but the other element of that is you talk about people holding on to your letter for a year and a half, 2 years. I did a poll of my clients, and to some extent it was frustrating, but I said, well, who in here has followed me the longest before you actually jumped on board? And we had 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, so like forever. And if I hadn't kept them on my mailing list and kept them on the email list and kept inviting them to webinars and everything else, they would have been gone. Instead, I just have somebody I just enrolled today, as a matter of fact, and he was a former client, long time ago, and I did a 3-step 3D mail, just like you talked about with them. They got a letter with a bank bag, they got a message in a bottle, and they got a trash can. And our average client value is going to be worth in the range of $80,000 to $100,000, right? So I spent less money than he'll pay in the first couple of months on the entire list, and we'll get a number of new clients from it. So the power of direct mail, especially any kind of dimensional or 3D mail, a round to it would be a grabber, or and it's a kind of lumpy, but you can do also a bank bag or something like that, is powerful, right? It really stands out from the crowd. The average person's getting 3 or 4 pieces of mail in the mail box per day, but 200 emails a day. And then when you start getting in the age category that you're talking about, they're certainly not getting flooded on message from Medicare and printing out their emails and putting it on their refrigerator to get around to later. It's just, once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, and what you talk about is it's the uniqueness. It's separating yourself from the pack, but it's something that has a long shelf life, because when you send somebody a message in a bottle, or we had actually sent out one of those little sand timers, talk about timing in life or whatever the pitch was. People keep that stuff. It's like a little trinket, but the trinket for people that are baby boomers, the wooden nickel, like we've had people say, the wooden nickel reminds me of something my grandfather gave me, like a buffalo nickel. Mm-hmm. And it's just all the conversations start from there. But the most receptive to it, and I always want to go back on this, is people say, well, that's great, and you can get a client. But here's the thing. The people that respond to direct mail are affluent people. And that is the biggest discernment I got out of this, is that 75 to 80% of our book of business, of Medicare clients, are paying IRMA, which means they're high income earners and they're high value clients. So that's what I believe is the power of direct mail is. She's just I think she took a picture of one of your clients got a direct mail letter from a guy in Pennsylvania, and he made it a three letter with bullet points and I'm like, he got somebody to write it for him, and it was 3 pages long. But what it did was it talked about features and benefits. Okay, if I could share the screen with you a minute, I'll show you. Our letter does not talk about features and benefits. So this is our letter here, and you can see it talks about the conversation in their head. There's what makes her different. There's the call to action. There's her signature. And then we have the website they can go to. They can call. They can email her, or they can go, we did the ultimate marketing machine. They can go to getmedicarereport.com and download a free report. And what I also added was these testimonials, because testimonials are very powerful, but when you include them in the letter, it even builds more credibility. Because what I've been finding in our niche is that our Google business site, like if you go search Google for the Medicare Authority, our Google business site gets 4,000 to 5,000 hits a month.
Yeah.
And so that is really the place that people, when they want to research who this lady is that sent her the letter, they go on her Google business page, they see 65 5-star reviews. And I know the traffic it's generating, and the multiple, like you can do your letter, and that letter can lead somebody to search for you on YouTube. It can lead somebody to search for you on your Google business site, and then you could link to your Facebook, and you can link to this and link to that. I believe that this is the foundation of the credibility.
Yeah.
And then when you add other media like video, or maybe a podcast, or a free report on a landing page with a follow-up email sequence, and you have and one of the very important things is we use a product called Podium. Podium captures the reviews, and it posts them on your Google business page, and it posts them on your website as well. So there's like a little, there's like a little code you can put on the website on a widget. So, it's not just this, but you can leverage this to get clients from video, website, and stuff, because when they get the letter, 9 times out of 10, they're searching for her online, and they search for her online. They're seeing all the great reviews and all the other information that they can learn about her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it puts you as the authority. It positions you.
Well, and as you know, the laws changed recently for financial advisors, but they're so scared about using reviews. But what definitely happens, I tell people, at least 85% of the people who are going to do business with you are going to go Google you first, right?
They always do.
And they're looking for positive reviews. They're looking for negative. They're looking for problems. They're looking for complaints. And if they go and they see just find you everywhere, that's always my rule of thumb, is I want to be found everywhere. And then the second thing is they see tons and tons of positive stuff. And, most of what any advisor is going to use is not going to be earnings claims. It's not going to be, claims about percentage return and stuff like that might get the ire of the regulators or of the compliance people. It's all going to be about, this is a great person. They're trustworthy. I had a great experience with them. It's all going to be stuff like that. And nobody can object to that from a standpoint of being in conflict with compliance.
Right. So this is the letter we did that did us the transition. So you could see our transition letter was very simple. Lenore introduced me in, and then we talked a couple bullet points: record high inflation, 8.5%. The real number is close to 18 based on CPI, soaring energy costs at the pump, rising food costs. So there's nothing I'm saying in this letter that is going to get anybody in a compliance problem. Now somebody may look at the title of the book, How to Fix the Ticking Time Bomb in Your Retirement, and want to change it and soften it. Why long-term care is the biggest threat no one is talking about. Yeah. So you may want.
I've seen a lot of advisor books that made it through compliance with very similar titles.
But this is exactly what we did. So we put a picture of our survey, a link to it. And in addition to this piece of paper, inside of the envelope was a paper survey on yellow paper. And this is really what started the whole ball kind of rolling from Medicare to retirement into things. Is the 3-letter sequence, this being the first one.
Well, it's exciting because I mean, you started out at as manual a labor as you can get on the thing, right? You started out with just cold calls, suspects, I guess, but then there wasn't much more than that to go for, and shifted the model completely to the other end with the 3,000 to 300, 3,500 clients now generated with direct mail, generating inbound inquiries and generating 40, 45 meetings a week, which is just phenomenal. And now you have a $10 million business buried underneath all of the Medicare insurance pieces of it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to learn from your book and you.
Yep, there you go. There you go.
It's always, for me, and I know in the conversation we had, and I know we're running out of time, but I do see it is our industry, even in Medicare, 95% of people fail. And I know the number as a financial advisor is probably even more, probably 99%. People don't make it 3 to 5 years. So I understand it is because you constantly feel like you're in pursuit mode. And I think this is what burns people out. And I've had friends that are financial planners that say, hey, I'm only going to, I've worked hard all these years. Now I'm only going to talk to people that have $1 million in assets or above. So, they're leaving crumbs on the table from a person that has a $500,000 rollover. But, they just don't want to deal with the little things. So they build themselves up and they get a nice sized book of business. And they say, this is good enough for me to keep it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But for where we're going, it's not about the income potential. But for me, I just want to say, if I could use this system to acquire 10,000 Medicare clients, and I could transition 30% of those clients to financial clients, imagine what kind of business you'll have.
Oh yeah, just incredibly solid, and the impact you're having on those clients is unbelievable.
Correct.
Right. Wait, I can't resist. I know you've been working through my book. What do you think so far? Is this all congruent with what's in there?
Absolutely. 100%. I would just tell people that it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to happen. And so something I learned a long time ago when I was in Aflac, and I met this gentleman, and he was a heavy smoker, and I think he was passing away from cancer, and he had a bunch of guys working in a little yard in New Jersey. And what this guy did was he had machines that he made that he would put a pallet in it, and it would separate the wood from the nails, right? And he'd have big drums of steel from the nails and then have the wood. And this is in 2008 when the economy was smoked, right? Mm-hmm. When everybody was losing. This guy had more business than he knew what to do with this. And I wondered, what does he do? He took all that crushed pallet board and he made particle board with it. And he had truckloads and truckloads. But when we kind of parted ways and I closed some people on his account, he gave me a book by a guy, Wayne Dyer. It's called 10 Secrets of Happiness and Success. And what Wayne Dyer talks about is one day he was playing catch with his son, and his son was a little awkward. In the beginning, he couldn't catch the football, and he kept doing it and doing it. And what his son learned was, failure is only a result. Mm-hmm. Is if we try different things and it fails, it's not a failure because we found out what doesn't work for us. So we need to modify and adjust and find out what does work. And I think the whole game with the magnetic marketing, the direct mail, and having a strong track record as a financial representative or an insurance representative is trying different things and sticking with them long enough until you find out what works for you. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people, they don't implement what you have in your book or what I may say because I just don't know if I could do that, or it would cost too much money, or I just don't understand it. It seems so complicated. But if you just do something happens, because how long would you sit on a train that isn't moving? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I hope people got a lot of value out of what we said today.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wrap up. We're about an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. So, but it's been great. And, again, if you get to the conclusion of where you're at right now, mailing 20,000 pieces a month to get 40 to 45 meetings a week. And most of the revenue has been on the Medicare side so far, but the opportunity of 1,500 of those clients who raise their hand, who all need, they need assets under management, they need annuities, they need all kinds of other elements, is just unbelievable. And most people would kill to have 1,500 leads, much less they're already clients, they already have a built-in relationship, one thing or another. How most people be happy to have 10 or 20 leads a month, much less all of that you have to work with. And even within the system that's clicking along, there's all kinds of tunes and tweaks probably along the way, moving up more aggressively to focusing on business owners, moving up more aggressively to focus on people who are liquidating or selling their business, moving up the scale on assets. All of those things are things you could do if you wanted to. You could be spending more money per person and targeting people with more money, higher level, if and you have to experiment with that, but that may be one way to go. But there's just a tremendous number of ways to grow from there.
Yeah, I always enjoyed the Gary Halbert technique of sending FedEx letters to business owners with a $100 bill at the top.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna get somebody's attention in marketing. That's the way to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. The classic dollar bill letter, on steroids. You mentioned Wayne Dyer. The favorite title from Wayne Dyer I remember is "You'll believe it when you'll see it when you believe it," right? Because most people say, "I'll believe it when I see it." His was you'll see it when you believe it. And I always thought that was a great title. Years ago, he was one of the ones I read all of his materials. Of course, he gets kind of airy-fairy here and there. His first book, Your Erroneous Zone, was a huge million book bestseller. I mean, it's still in back order. He's another one that passed away a few years ago. Wayne Dyer, Jim Rome, Zig Ziglar. You go through the list, we lost a lot of the greats.
Jim Rome was one of my favorites. His original CD set, Secret for Happiness and Success. When he talked about his network marketing journey and his business, I always thought it was fantastic. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job.
That's exactly right. Well, hey guys, it's been great. We'll have to call it a day here. I'll turn off all